Okay, so first thing, so we can't call it to order before we pick a new chair for today.
You have to make a vote on the chair first.
Motion to nominate Brian Lambert as the chair for the day.
Second it.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. So call to order today's meeting of the State Athletic Commission. Let's start with roll call. Just members of the public, please announce yourself, name. Start with
Paul Carter, Commissioner.
Brian Lambert, Commissioner.
Dave Riccio, Commissioner.
Officer Hiller, Compliance Officer.
Jen Fraga, Program Coordinator.
Matt Keegan, Executive Director.
John High, Assistant Legal Counsel, DPL.
Joe Leonard, Western Mass MMA.
Frank Leonard.
Tom Gonzo, Massachusetts State Athletic Commission.
Sam Silverman, President of the Commission.
Dr. Ricky Bolinas, member of the Medical Advisory Board, Lakeside position.
All right. Thank you, everyone. All right, so Commissioners, anyone have a chance to review the minutes from the February 21st meeting? Anyone like to make a motion, comments, etc.? Commissioner? No?
Nope.
I can't make the motion.
Motion to approve the minutes from Feb. 21.
Second.
All in favor?
All in favor? Aye. All right. So application for Tom, Mr. Tom Sconzo. Would you like to just come forward, sir?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us today. How you doing?
Very good, thank you.
So just have your application, kickboxing ref. Do you just want to tell us a little bit about experience, why you want to do it? Just give us a little overview.
Sure, no problem. I've been a member of the martial arts community on combat for the last 48 years, from boxing right up to martial arts. At one point switched over to becoming an official. I've been with Massachusetts State Athletic Commission doing refereeing the MMA. However, I have over 1,000 Muay Thai Pro and Am bouts. As a matter of fact, I'm doing the one April 6th, Friday Night Fights, and I'm also doing April 5th. I'm doing a seminar April 4th to certify my judges and referees and inspectors in Muay Thai. So this is just one more thing to come to Massachusetts and be able to help out when needed.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, you're well-known, appreciate all you do in the community. I don't think there's much that I can add. You guys have any questions? No.
Thank you.
Motion
Thank you.
Motion to approve the application for Muay Thai referee for Thomas Sconzo.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. All right. Do you want to just come right back up and walk us through the bare knuckle?
Thank you. This is very exciting. My role, just not to be confused, very close friends with Big Dan Mergliata, Wayne Spinola, and Bill Clancy, also inducted this year into the Boxing Hall of Fame. My background in boxing, as I was saying earlier, has been a lifelong one. I forgot tonight, usually with my dad's 1949 Golden Gloves. I am a Golden Glove fighter. I coach at Atlantic Veteran, level 3 coaching, as well as refereeing with some notable people, coaching Shane Mosley, and I put 3 boxers in the Olympics. So boxing to me is a very special sport. The martial arts was something that grew out of my love of combat sports, and both of them have been very, very special to me. I became involved with the bare knuckle, just watching it, following it, being friends with the people that are involved, the referees, Sean Wheelock, who's well known, also now as part of Bare Knuckle, Dave Feldman, the CEO. And as it's being accepted and growing, I've helped bridge that gap between commissions and explaining the importance of what we're looking for. And I'm going to represent kind of both sides, the commission side and bare knuckle, in explaining it. We think this is an amazing sport that has that sound that it's a little bit dangerous because bare knuckle, but that's far from the truth. Bare knuckle boxing has been around 300 years, and it started out as bare knuckle. It was only until 1933 where we came out with gloves. And the whole point of gloves was to protect the hand, because the sport was actually boring when it started in terms of being able to get the knockouts and what. Gloves and the wraps protect the hand. They do not protect the head. In today's day and age, we are very concerned about CTEs and traumatic brain injury from our fighters. Coming back to bare knuckle boxing, it is much safer, and I've sent a lot of this to Commissioner Licciardi with stats and results from our bouts. The last one we did, which I'm going to give this to you to take, out of 12 bouts, we've had the majority no injuries, one broken hand, and one chipped tooth and a laceration, as compared to 12 bouts in mixed martial arts or any other sport where there is. If you consider the fact that I can mount someone, an opponent, and rain down straight punches and elbows, that is, in my opinion, more dangerous than anything. The bare knuckle fighting we use, and I've helped write the rules for the bare knuckle so that it mirrors traditional boxing. We do it obviously to make it a little bit different. We have two lines in the front. We call it toe in the line, where they square off. They are 2-minute rounds. We go either 3 rounds, 5 rounds, 7, depending on the experience of the fighter. The experience of the referees that doesn't need an explanation because you know them. There's no kicks, no elbows, no clinch. Well, the clinch, like in traditional boxing, we break them up fairly quickly. Fighter gets knocked down, we do 10 seconds to get back up. If he doesn't get back up, the fight is over. We're very good at making sure that these fighters are well protected. We have cut men the same as in boxing. We can give a 30-second timeout for the cut man to address the bleeding. If the doctor himself, the way we do in any other combat sport, deems it, we're going to call an end to that. So it's 2 minutes per round. 5-round length is pretty much what we go with. They wear the cup, they wear the mouthpiece. The most important thing from the commission point of view, safety, what we're doing, we can adapt our rules, the rules that I've helped build to satisfy the commission. If the commission says, we want some type of wrap on the hand, we can do that. I mean, so we would like to bring it. This thing has become explosive. Paulie Malignaggi was just signed. Paulie Malignaggi, if you don't know, 2002 to 2017 world champion in two divisions. He just signed with bare knuckle. And the reason why I'm here today is because he wants to fight one particular person, Conor McGregor. There is a 9-figure offer on the table. What makes it more exciting, one of the best shows I've done here in Boston when I worked UFC at TD Center, I didn't know who the hell Conor McGregor was until I came out here and then realized, wow, the place exploded. So that's the type of fighter. We're getting a lot of the fighters that have been cut or retired or never made it to UFC Bellator, and they're stepping up and they're coming in and they're putting on a show. And again, I can't stress enough that the safety issue is paramount. We've done shows in Wyoming, Mississippi, Mexico City, and we have not sent a fighter to the hospital.
Can I ask a couple questions?
Sure.
As you go here. What's on the hands? Like nothing? Or
No. We use a typical wrap.
Yeah.
We can adapt it to meet the needs of the commission, to show you what we're doing. But for the most part, I've spent my life fighting. This is what I do, and I don't think my looks and my ears and anything have really changed. And I've grown up in it. My daughters fight, my son fights. With gloves on, it gives, with that surface area to get in there and cut and do damage. With the bare knuckle or with the light wrap with the gauze, two things happen. And it's very interesting. I did bring something that addresses that in terms of the amount of pound pressure when you're fighting with gloves on, like 1,300 pounds of strike. Without gloves on, it's a third of that. And I've got documentation on that. So you're not getting that. Without the gloves, a fighter is more inclined to be aware of what his strike zone is, so not to break his hand. He's going to time his punches. In a traditional in a traditional boxing match, and this I'll leave, and like I said, I've sent it in advance. The average amount of punches in a bare knuckle boxing match is generally 37 to 50 punches thrown in 3 minutes, 17 to 30 landed. Whereas in a traditional boxing match, we have 48 to 88 punches thrown in 3 minutes with 46 landed. So when you don't, and I believe this as a coach, and I've coached a lot of guys into everything from Glory to Karate Combat to Bellator and UFC. When we're training, as a coach, I'm adamant about no heavy sparring. That is something that you do for competition. But when they put the shin guards on and they put the gear on, they go a lot harder. I think without the shin guards, for my advanced students, they're not throwing with that same intensity. They're more aware of shin-to-shin contact. They're more aware. And I feel the same way when I do light sparring without gloves on. And I do that to create a sense of awareness, distance, reach, level change, angles. So to me, without the gloves on, I'm going to be a lot more aware of where I'm hitting and how fast I'm throwing that punch and making contact. And I think on the other end, I'm also more aware of that I might get hit. So fighters will probably break a thumb. I've had that. I've seen the broken back of the hand. But you're not seeing from the traditional fights that a doctor will see the orbital being crushed, the eyes. You might get a broken nose. But from a safety point of view, but from a fan point of view, we're gonna deliver an unbelievable experience to what you're doing here.
Yeah, I know the Wyoming show is really well received.
Well, Sean Wheelock, no, that's Kansas, great commissioner.
What are you seeing for average age of the fighters? And I asked the question.
That's a great question, and the average age is going to be between 18 and 28, right in there. There are a few older fighters, but with an older fighter comes greater requirements from a medical point of view, whether that be the dilated eye exam, EKG, MRI. So, Paulie Malignaggi, perfect example. He's a little older, so but he's a fighter, and he's been well looked at by medical professionals to.
But I asked the question because I think it's a positive from the standpoint of I think it allows some of the MMA guys to maybe extend their career a little bit, move into a different element of the fighting sport where they might not be able to compete in the full MMA arena, so to speak. But this is something that they might be able to extend their career and continue to do.
Oh, we're definitely seeing that. We're definitely seeing a lot of people sign on that come from the other side of the MMA. And actually this is a lot more fun from a fighter's point of view. I'm not getting taken down. I'm not getting ground and pounded. I'm not taking knees to the head. So from that point of view, even when I'm sparring with my students at my age, they're aware not to hit coach in the head. It's just not a good idea to make your coach mad. But I'm a lot more comfortable, and I play with this without the gloves on because it does teach control. So, and that was the reason I didn't bring anybody else from bare knuckle, because I felt I could make a good enough presentation. But on the other side, being part of Massachusetts, I could represent both sides of that very, very well and help out, from the point of view of the commission, because I'd be hopefully I don't have any signed contracts with bare knuckle. I came up here because I felt very comfortable knowing most of you on the board here.
So what is the proposal? Is it to?
We just want you to approve it so we can get some dates, and every show that's come is sold out. And if we could do that one bout, if we get Connor to sign, but if not, we will bring, and I say we, because I'm very much in touch with David, who just rang my phone. He said, put me on speaker if you need anything, and I said, no, we're good. Some of the best talent that's out there, and like you said, there's no shortage of people that would still want to extend their career, and this is now something that's exciting, it's a little safer, but to the public, it'll sell.
Is it approved anywhere else?
Yes, as a matter of fact,
Wyoming, Mississippi, right?
Yeah.
Yes, the first show was in Wyoming. And the first show was in Wyoming. Was that the first US show?
That's correct. I have everything in there, and I'll leave this one here too. And I have the results of each one, so you can tell how the fighters fared in terms of injury, in terms of, whether they're points or knockouts. So that's important.
So, Counsel, can I ask a question? So from a practical standpoint, I'm not jumping forward here, I just want to understand what the practical process would be to approve it. Would this be us issuing variances on the current regs to approve a fight? That would actually
I'd
be.
have to refer to Kevin and John on that one, but that was what I was thinking, is that you would.
They'd almost have to
A variance. or
come to
variance,
us,
same thing.
they'd almost have to come to us with a very detailed, here's the show we're looking to put on, here are the regs that we're looking to get variances on. Do you understand?
I would
what-
ask Tom as well,
Yeah.
how do the other states handle it? Do they have regulation? Did they write out regulations for these, or do they come to the board looking for variances away from?
We've worked with every ABC so far so that they understand that we're doing the boxing rules, which have been established. I'm not trying to reinvent anything. However, if your commission has something specific that they want or don't want, it hasn't happened, but we're going to put it back out to you. If you're looking at this saying, this makes sense, we're not doing kicking, we're not doing knees, there's no elbows, there's no headbutts. We have highly professional referees like Big Dan and Wayne and Bill Clancy who are going to come in. We could also work, Massachusetts Commission officials in. I'm not worried about the judges. I can I can explain to them what we're looking at, the boxing. You have them now. I know that. I know Marcel Varela, who's also joined, and one of the people that have come up under me. So I have no problem with maintaining the safety with the official. I have no problem redefining the rules, and the fighters know the rules well before they step into that ring.
Right. My feeling is I would want to speak with Wyoming and Mississippi
Yeah.
and get a sense of how they
See
do
how they
it.
did it.
Yeah.
I could send you the names of the commissioners if you don't have it,
Yeah.
who was directly involved.
Yeah, why don't you do that so we can get an idea of how
That's
best
easy.
to
That's-
paper this? Yeah.
Commissioner Sean Willock in Kansas, so we can definitely, and then also, the people that you do have here, like Big Dan Mergliano, who is recovering, you could speak to him, he's been one of the officials from the beginning. And so it's not only people that you can reach out to, but people from our own family.
So I saw, I mean, I've seen this before too, but I saw all the stats about the pounds, the number of cuts, injuries. The pound study, the force study, was that a university study? I think
That was a university study, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
where was that to?
I can send, I know I've sent a lot of it to Guy, I can, be more than
Yeah.
happy to send everything over to you.
Yeah, please.
Who's done the studies, where, and
Yeah.
the credibility of the people doing the studies.
Yeah.
Which is important, and,
Okay. Yeah, I think a good first step for us would be to understand the logistics of, I mean, we can review all this and talk about whether it's something we want to approve and have take place, but we also need to understand how we would execute that from a reg standpoint. And I think getting connected with what Mississippi did, Wyoming did, and understanding that would be really helpful for us. Dr. Belinas, do you want to?
Yes, I recall working a bare knuckle show. And I just can't remember the exact time frame, but it's somewhere in the neighborhood of like 5, maybe 7 years ago. There was a show that took place in Hampton, in New Hampshire, I believe, the casino. And at that point, it was DirecTV that was backing bare knuckle boxing. And I had the opportunity to be chosen to work that show. It was myself and another physician from New Hampshire. And it was kind of like that kickoff show. I mean, their first premiere show, and it was being recorded by DirecTV. It was a whole big ordeal. Mike Buffer, was the MC for the event. And I think they had at least 8 bouts. Do you recall that yourself?
No, I don't.
Historically? Yeah.
Bless you.
And, bless you again. And I know the rounds were shorter, You said
Yeah,
2
2
minute
minutes.
rounds, right?
2 minute
Yeah.
rounds, yes.
And I recall that they fought in a circular
A
ring.
hexagon.
Huh?
It's a hexagon.
Hexagon?
Yeah.
No, it was no, it was a,
They had the
it was
four
a
sides?
circle.
No, this one was a pit. They
Yeah,
did,
it was were you there?
yeah, I was there. They
Yeah.
did a pit, and they also, they called
Well,
it, they
let me
advertised it
fin-
as bare knuckle boxing, but they cut the gloves.
Well, that was my other point. I mean, it was a circular type of a stage,
Mhm.
and what they did was then they brought up at like a 50-degree angle, 45-degree angle, in an exterior that was cushioned, and it was rather interesting. I mean, the idea was, you know, the fighters really needed to engage in an offensive manner because it was a small circular ring, and they weren't allowed, you know, to go outside the ring. And the reason it was cushioned was because, so you got no place to run, you know, you're not one of these defensive postures, you're more offensive. And from my recollection, that increased, you know, significant blow-by-blow contact. And again, there were a lot of KOs in this particular event because nowhere to run, you have to engage, and therefore you have to slug it out. So it's interesting what you bring up as
Yeah.
far as statistics, that there were less sort of morbidity, if you will, as opposed to what I saw at that particular night.
I don't, this is definitely not that. I
Yeah.
know,
So it's a traditional boxing
a
ring?
traditional, yeah,
Or is it a cage?
No cage, it's a ring.
It's a ring,
It's a ring
okay.
with 2 lines, it's total line where they step up to the line and they start that way. It
Is
just-
it the same size of a boxing ring?
Yes,
or
yes,
a
every,
boxing
the
ring?
dimensions, I have it all
I see.
in there.
So in that sense, then a fighter can do the usual defensive running and fight type of routine.
Exactly.
I see. All right, because like I said, that setup was geared, you know, to have toe-to-toe battle, and that's why these. And you were there, you said, right? You remember? You recall a bunch of KOs and a bunch of TKOs. So that, to me, just emphasized the fact that that's definitely more, you know, of a morbidity type of a sport. Not less than what you're telling us.
No,
So
no, we-
I'd make a suggestion that, you know, the medical advisory board review, you know, what this is all about as well, and all the statistical stuff that Steve brings up, you know, would be obviously one for us to take a peek at as well, too.
Yeah.
And then the other thing was that the glove, you didn't happen to bring the glove itself, or?
We don't have a glove.
There is no glove, it's
No.
just wraps.
It's just a wrap, yes.
It's interesting, too.
That's-
Because that, back in that event, it was a glove, and what they did was they cut out
Right.
and made the knuckles, but the knuckles were wrapped too. But that was their version of a glove, you know, a glove that.
Well, I think the benefit here is we'd be able to see for the medical advisory board exactly what
Yeah.
in real numbers took
Right.
place in Wyoming
Yeah,
and Mississippi,
precisely.
and kind of review how that was
We'd be willing to
conducted.
make any
Yeah, I mean,
adjustments.
of all those events, how many fighters are we, you know, how many
We do
total
12
fighters?
bouts, 12 bouts, usually per show. I've given a breakdown of every bout, every
Right,
show.
sure. So how many total fighters were we talking about?
Well, if there's 12 bouts, 24 fighters.
24 fighters?
Yes, so.
And that's 24 fighters times how many shows? Just that one show?
Oh, okay, no, I've got, we've
So how many
had,
shows have you had so far?
we've done about 4 or 5 shows so
4
far.
or 5 shows, so well over 100
Yes.
fighters got engaged with the sport
And
itself.
we've had no hospital sends, we've had laceration, broken
Yeah.
hand,
Okay.
broken thumb, but
Interesting.
we're pretty happy about the results right now.
Yeah.
And like, you know, where that's coming from to New Hampshire, I think even MMA has shown us where that started to where it is now, to where it's been controlled. We're all very aware of not being perceived by the public as putting on some kind of ultimate, you know, thug fight or no holds barred. This is very controlled. Our rules are pretty much right in line with boxing. The bouts are shorter, and we're very aware of safety. So, and again, back to the commission, if you know, you're looking at the way we're doing the hands, if there's adjustments that you need to be, you know, that you want made, we can do that. You know, we're gonna go in line with what the commission says.
Well, I think some first great steps would be, let's see what you can send us from, you know, the fights that have taken place, just kind of, you know, the numbers that we've discussed here.
Yeah, like you can see in here that I just
Gotcha,
gave.
okay. And then,
You'll see every bout
Yeah.
and what we've done.
and then it would be helpful for us to understand from a practical standpoint, how we could actually approve a match.
It's a type of boxing. We're not reinventing any sport.
No, I
We're going
understand
back
that,
up
but
again, yeah.
unfortunately, the regs are really detailed about, a boxing, the gloves have to be a certain weight, size, all that's, would need to be reviewed on a match-by-match basis without bare knuckle boxing being specifically approved under your rules in the regs. So that's fine. We've done, other events where we have to issue variances to approve an event outside of the regs, but we have to know specifically what needs to be approved outside of the regs.
I can get that to you, Jim?
Easy to execute with some research. So-
Okay, we can send you as much information, I think you'll find,
Yeah.
and give you the names and phone numbers of people to talk to, even the physicians that were ringside.
Yeah.
And we can do that, so that you'll get a different point of view than from somebody like myself.
So all the medical requirements are gonna be the same?
Everything is the same, blood work and medicals, and there's no difference there, we're not changing anything.
So it sounds like they'd be licensed as boxers.
Yes, that's what.
They'd need to be licensed as boxers, and then the event itself would be where the variances would be issued.
Let me see, I mean, are you looking at, not just for a variance, but you're looking to have the sport sanctioned, just like the UFC,
Well,
it's sanctioned?
we are sanctioned wherever we go, I mean,
Well, no, correct me if I'm wrong, I see that as a difference. I mean, the UFC came to be sanctioned,
Yeah.
again, correct me if I'm wrong, and by that, it meant that they, from that point on, can come back to the state, do more shows, and that's what they did from that point on. And we
I think it's
sat-
probably
we
a bigger hurdle to get sanctioned. So
Yes.
I think we start
Most
with,
definitely.
Yeah, Yeah.
altering the regs as needed.
I
for
think that would
variance.
be, we can put this together and get a show here, sometime in the near future. I think that would be, we could start.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't think any of us are opposed to that. I think we'll review, let the medical advisory take a board, figure out how to make that happen. I don't see any major hurdles, but we do have to go through the
No,
exercise.
due diligence
Yeah.
is important.
Yeah, yeah.
And I know that there was another similar bare knuckle organization, which is now out of business for a variety of reasons. One, not paying the fighters, paying the officials, and that's not that long ago. So we just want to make that very clear that this is BNFC, Bare Knuckle Fighting Championship. The CEO is David Feldman.
Yep.
I will get you all the information you need from the other commissions,
Yeah.
so we can hopefully move this thing forward. And like I said, I'll work with the commission as part of Massachusetts, or independently representing them, so that I can be the conduit to what you need and making sure it's all done. Well, I do it now. I do all the blood work, medicals in a Dropbox, and I send it to our physicians that are doing the fight. So I see step one, I send it there, and anything beyond that, we just make life easier.
Is there a time frame you're looking to have your first show, and what time frame is that?
What's that?
Do you have like a set date you're hoping to have?
I would love to see a show here at TD in May,
May.
if we can bring Malinaji and Connor together. I'd love to see it,
I
that
would like to see that too.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to stand in the way of that. That would be a nice show, but, so let's do this. Let's move the conversation forward into some action steps. So Jen, who would be the point of contact to
Me.
reach out and get? Okay, so I think Jen will follow up with you, request, what we need, and we'll put this on the agenda for our April meeting.
Perfect. And I'll give you Dave Feldman's phone number, the CEO and president, so instead of, you can just get all that right there. I'll tell him what we need, and that you'll be in touch with him. I'll send you his email and contact information, and I'll send him yours.
Dr. Believers, do you know when the next medical advisory board meeting is?
March 27th.
March
Thank you,
27th.
Jen.
March
Welcome,
27th.
Dr.
So that's next Wednesday. So maybe that's something we could sneak on your agenda, take an initial peek at. Yeah.
Okay. I'll send everything
Awesome.
within the next day or so.
Sounds good.
All right.
All right.
Thank you so
so
much.
much for everybody's time. Great seeing everybody.
No, thank
I
you.
get to be all dressed up instead of a black
You look
shirt.
great.
Okay.
All right, thank you so much. Are we calling Mr. A.D. Foster? Okay.
Yep.
All right,
We ready?
ready for you?
Sam, you want to come up? Brian, do you mind if Sam comes up from the, he's from the Rondell Clark?
Yeah, of
any
course.
questions? Yes.
Of course.
Hello?
Hi, Mr. Foster? Andy?
Yes.
Hi, this is Jen from the Massachusetts State Athletic Commission. You are on conference call with our board.
Hello?
Hello, can you hear me okay? This is Brian Lambert, Commissioner Lambert, acting chair for today. How are you?
I'm good, sir. Thank you.
Well,
Thanks for calling me.
No, thank you for taking the time to speak with us. So you're on speaker, we can all hear you. Do you want to start with your thoughts on the 10-point plan, why we're connecting today?
Well, I mean, my thoughts just on weight cutting and dehydration, severe dehydration in general, is there is no doubt, commissioners, this is the single biggest issue facing mixed martial arts, and it's probably in the top 2 or 3 issues facing boxing. There's no doubt. Every mixed martial arts fighter, with the exception of heavyweights and perhaps less than 1%, cut weight. They all cut weight. I've provided data points. We've got data on about 3,000 athletes. They're all cutting weight, and we have about, I believe it's about 20% that are cutting more than 10%. 10% of your body weight in 24 hours. It's a big problem. I'm glad you guys are taking the time to look at it and to address it, because it's what I told the director last week, and I told my commissioners this. Commissioners, we regulate a combat sport. I think the general public can accept the possibility that there are going to be accidents and bad things will happen in combat sports in a cage or a ring. I think people generally get that, accept that premise. What is not acceptable, because we answer to the public and we answer with the state that is doing this activity, what is not acceptable to anyone, certainly not acceptable to me, is the danger should not be being able to participate in this activity. Now let's be clear, commissioners, these commissions, my commission, your commission, we regulate the weigh-in. We regulate these contracts, we approve the matches. So when we're telling a fighter, listen, you can fight at welterweight, let's use that weight class, let's call it 170. We should have a fairly decent understanding that this fighter can actually make 170 and not just taking a matchmaker's word for it.
So, you mind if I ask a couple questions?
Absolutely, sir.
So, I've read the 10-point plan, thought a lot about it. It's a subject we're obviously taking serious here in Massachusetts. We're going through a full reg review and incorporating this obviously into that in our conversations. Are you aware with Jody McCormick in Alabama and kind of what the Alabama Athletic Commission did?
I am, sir. Yes, sir.
So I'm just curious what your thoughts are there, because obviously the 10-point plan is the 10-point plan. You've adopted it in California. They adopted, I think, roughly 4 of the 10. I mean, what are your thoughts around that?
There's going to be Jody basically has himself and maybe one other staff member. It's limited staff, So when you have limited staff, my thoughts are you do what you can. Okay, the biggest piece of the 10-point plan that I think is just almost the kind of the crux of the rest of the points is the licensing by weight class. Okay? I never had really, I came up in this industry and you just would get a license and you'd just fight, and if you wanted to change weight classes, you could just change. You go up and down like, people go up and down these weight classes. And, the commissions, the regulators, we just kind of go along with that. Well, that's not the way that should be. The doctors, the medical professionals should have a say on whether these athletes can actually compete safely in the weight class that they've chosen. If medical professionals tell the commission this is an okay weight class for this fighter, then that's at least one layer of protection for that fighter that you can rest assured that at least on the point of weight, this fighter is okay to move forward with. So I think Jody did that piece of it. So that's really the big piece of it is you want to have not a ringside physician, but just a normal, whoever's given the physical, because these people are licensed by the medical board. You want to have your physician certify that this athlete is okay and safe to compete the weight class. Now, our medical advisory committee actually put on their forms, recommended max walking weight for the physicians to look at. So essentially, if a person's wanting to fight 170 and they come in and they weigh 210, the doctor will have pretty much clearly in front of them that this is not okay for the athletic commission.
Yeah, so
but basically 188 or less is okay.
Yeah. So so I'm looking at your license right here. So it says, please specify the lowest weight you intend to compete in. So does that mean someone gets licensed at that weight as their lowest weight, but they can still move up at any point, or do they need to obtain a new license if they move up in weight?
No, they can move up. They can't move down.
Can't move down. Okay.
Yeah, because you typically, what was it? And we do it in boxing too. It's a little bit different. But I believe it's did Mikey Garcia this weekend? Didn't he move up 2 weight classes to fight Spence? Something like that.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And so and he lost the decision, but everybody knows or whatever. But I think everybody can get the fact that it's a little bit easier, especially with the amount of weight these guys are cutting still, to move up. Moving down, especially with mixed martial arts, because of the spreads. Even at the bottom, they're 10-pound spreads. You know what I mean? There's 10-pound spreads, and then when you get to 70, and it's a 15-pound spread, and then, it just goes from there. So I think the weight classes are pretty far apart, and even with the adoption of the new weight classes, which absolutely should happen, and by the way, it's going to happen, whether it happens right now or it happens 10 years from now. But I have a deep suspicion 65 is coming to mixed martial arts. There's just a lot of fighters stuck in that 55 to 70 range. And the guys that are 70 are walking at 90 or better. And the guys that, about 180, you cut to 55, and that's just a normal thing of doing business.
Yep.
And there's a gap there, and I believe that 10-pound increments makes more sense. But that kind of goes to the 0.3.
Yeah, and I would say we agree with you there. We're in agreement on the additional weight classes kind of coming along for everyone.
You guys want to talk about the battle agreement at all?
Yeah, go ahead. Dive in.
Well, so I'm sure you're aware, but MMA is paid differently than boxing.
Mm-hmm.
I can go into the history of why that is. That's not relevant. what is relevant is it's paid differently. Boxers are paid a purse, mixed martial arts are paid a base purse and then a bonus if they win. I've always thought it was to save the commissioners 25% of the overall revenue. So for example, if a fighter in mixed martial arts, say a fighter in boxing is paid $20,000, that same athlete in mixed martial arts would be paid 10 and 10. 10 to show, 10 to win. Okay, it's the way it works. And, the opponent's something similar. Let's be clear about this. I think it's an important point to remember. Boxing and mixed martial arts are promoted differently. That's why this is important. You have multiple promoters in boxing. You might have, over there on your side, you might have DeBella, and you might have, a Kathy Duva, and you might have lots of different pieces that come together to create a show. In mixed martial arts, the promoter controls both sides of the card. They control the A and the B side. So UFC, when they come in, all those fighters that are fighting in the UFC, they're all UFC fighters. I tell you this because, the bonus and the win is paid like that. So it's considered like that. So what we did was we said that the contract is fined. Basically, you will be fined on the total compensation. What we were seeing happening is there were a few fighters that looked at our weight spreads, they looked at our contract, and they figured things out. They'll let their opponent get drained, cut down real low, and they'll just come in and miss weight by 6 or 7 pounds. They just show up. And then at that point, the promoter kind of puts pressure on the fighter because they need to fight, although it's not like direct pressure. And I'm certainly not talking about the UFC here. I'm talking about just regular club show promoters need to fight. And the fighter will take it, and then they get beat, and they're paid 20% of their show money, of their base purse, and the guy can walk away with the 20% win bonus because it wasn't part of the original purse. We changed the bout agreement so it was just like in boxing. Total compensation from the purse is what you're fined on. So if you want to pay to be bigger game, you'll at least be fined a little bit more from that. Now that's not a whole lot of, if somebody misses weight by 6 or 7 pounds, really, our spreads, and I haven't read your regulations, but I would imagine your spreads would allow that match to move forward. But you really got to think about, is this the appropriate weight class for this fighter if they miss legitimately for 6 or 7, or if they just basically cheated and just didn't even try just to get an advantage. And paying to be bigger is a real thing.
So, separate question. I was just reviewing the application. So there's a lot of, there's just some kind of some notes on here about all the different weight classes and kind of education around physical stuff. What are you guys doing outside of that, like general fighter education in the community? Can you kind of talk to us quickly about that outside of the 10-point plan?
We have a whole lot of brochures that we have at weight classes. We have a couple videos that we put up. We've actually have one of our videos got a whole lot of hits. That's basically the extent of what we've been doing. Is we've just been trying to pass out educational brochures on it, these type of things. But what we're trying to do is ultimately change the culture. And I'm in the middle of a research study with a major university right now that's taking our data, because if I can show, and right now I've not been able to show, but if I can show that you're statistically more likely to lose the fight if you engage in this nonsense, then at least I'll have a leg up that I can go back to the trainers and these type of people and say, look, this, not only is it not healthy, which is the first and foremost point, but it's not giving you a competitive advantage. In fact, it's giving you a competitive disadvantage, statistically speaking. If I can show that, I think that will be the first move towards trying to change what the trainers believe is happening, because no athlete likes to cut weight, but the athlete and the trainers are caught up in this idea that if they cut all this weight, they'll have some competitive advantage. The problem is their opponent knows it as well, and his trainer or her trainer knows it also. So it's like this race to the bottom. So not only do we have a fight competition, a combat sports competition, we have a competition the day before on who can cut the most. So you got two competitions. You got a weigh-in competition, and then you've got who can rehydrate the best. That's a competition. By the way, we banned IV rehydration over here. We got rid of that. My doctors and I'm of the opinion that if you need an IV to rehydrate from a weight cut, you're not in the right weight class, and you shouldn't be competing the next day in a combat sports competition if you need a medical IV to rehydrate yourself.
Yeah, how do you monitor that? You can go to like IV bars for a couple $100 now at most major cities.
Sure. One of the ways that you monitor it is tough, and it's a great question. But the fighters, they have loose lips, and they'll tattle. They just tell on each other, and the trainers will tell, and they'll come in and they'll say, we had one last week. I won't mention the name, but a real super high profile fighter. They asked Sandy, can we do, the promoter asked Andy that he wants to do the IV rehydration, so I sent him the reg that says he couldn't, and we checked. So, just to make sure that they know that that's not an option for them coming in. And then look, it's hard to check. It's hard to enforce, but having it out there in regulation that this is not allowed is better than not having it there.
Yep. Okay.
My name's Michael Paul there with Cage Titans. Andy, I just had a quick question. When you were talking about the weight cutting and the responsibility of the matchmaker presenting to the athletic commission and them having some responsibility for presenting a certain weight class, what responsibility do you guys put on the trainers themselves? Because as a matchmaker, promoter, former fighter myself, we get fed this information from a trainer who is licensed in this state. They should have some responsibility that they're projecting an actual weight that their fighter can make, because many of the times we're taking their word on it. And if they're licensed through Massachusetts, how do you guys handle that?
Well, I mean, you're going to have a database already for your Massachusetts fighters of what their physical says right now. Jen can go back and pull lots of data on these people, and then you can pull what they weighed at the weigh-in, okay? And I don't know if you guys weighed them the second day, but if you don't, you should start. That way you can start tracking this information. But dealing with the trainers, you've just got to come under the idea that if a matchmaker calls, there's very few fighters that are going to tell the matchmaker they can't make the weight that's been proposed. Okay? Now, let's be clear about this. That likelihood of a decline of a fight offer decreases significantly with the amount of the purse that's offered and the promotion that's offered it. So if a major promotion comes, that fighter is going to say that they can make the weight no matter what, really. I mean, if it's within reason, and that trainer is going to try to help them make it. So one of the things that we do especially on those real high-profile fights that get advertised and you've got a lot of public interest. I wish I could do it on everybody. We don't have the bandwidth on it. But we try to get our own weight check on these fighters. We'll Skype them, we'll do something, and people, it causes a bit of inconvenience for the fighter, and they don't like it. Some of them don't mind, but they don't like it. But I think everybody understands why it happened. And the reason that we started doing that is I had UFC 177 out here. I believe that was the number. I'm going to tell you wrong. It was scheduled Hannah Morale versus Dillashaw. And I had 2 fighters on that card the day of the weigh-in get pulled off and hospitalized, and one of them was my main event. So then I have to figure out the methods and the regulations on refund of tickets if a main event's canceled. And you have a UFC pay-per-view where we're having to issue, the promoters issuing refunds and these type of things. It was just a really, that's what really kind of perked perked me up about weight cutting and what this can do. And I started doing all these studies on it. The trainer is going to facilitate the fighter. So I don't think that the trainer is the best gauge on whether this fighter can make this weight or not. I really think that doctor, who's often not part of this industry, most always not part of it, saying if this fighter can safely make that, and then you have a baseline on what this fighter actually was 60 or 90 days out or whenever they go and take their physical. And you can start tracking it. If Jen gets somebody who's proposed at welterweight and that fighter's 210, they're 40 pounds over, so let's give them the pound, so they're 39 over. Well, if they've got 39 to cut, Jen's able to take it to the commission or to the medical doctors or whoever reviews your physicals and says, is this okay? And most likely at 39 pounds, I guess it would depend on the time period, but you've got to look at it and probably they're going to say, no, this is too much. And then Jen can go back to the matchmaker and say, look, the doctors won't do it at 70. Do you want to do a catch weight? And by the way, let's talk about catch weights for a second. What is wrong with catch weight, these spreads? I have my guys do catch weights all the time, my matchmakers, because the doctors just won't go along with some of the, because when we got the weights, we have the information now. And I think the information is the key for the commission being able to regulate this properly, because if you have the information, you now know. And if you know, I think that's half of this, and you're able to make better decisions. To answer your question directly, I think the trainers have some degree of responsibility, but they're not going to, their job is to help that fighter. I think the cultural change is what we need to help with the trainers and stuff, because I don't think they're going to, and I don't want to paint everybody with a broad brush, but I don't think their interest isn't to cancel fights.
I think Andy, Michael, again, in the UFC level, and I think some of the bigger promotions, I'm thinking more at the club level. As a matchmaker, many of the times the question just goes right out to the schools. Hey, we have a show April 6th. What fighters do you have at what weight classes? And that's the information we get provided by these trainers / managers / coaches. And I think that you bring up a very good point on some of the larger scale fights. If I'm calling up TJ Dillashaw and say I got a last minute replacement, you need to make 135 in 3 weeks. Yes, there's not some responsibility there. I'm talking more on the club level that you called it. That's how the matchmaking process goes out here. The schools and the trainers are providing us, all right, I got Joe Leonard at 155 pounds for April 6th. Let me know who you got. I don't think that there's as much strong arming on the local level or the club level fitting these guys into weight classes. And I think that here in Massachusetts, we don't have the UFC often, so I think that we're trying to clean up. I can't speak for the commission, but I'd like to see us try to clean up the local level, so to speak.
And I appreciate that. So we have lots of both kinds out here. We have lots of club shows and lots of the big ones. And it's the same process though, because you're exactly right. They call the gym. They say we need a 170 or a 155, and they'll say, okay, we got this guy or this guy. Well, now either the person has a license or they don't. Okay, if they have a license, you'll have a weight on what they were at least fairly recently. And let me just say this: if they have a license that's old, that's like, let's say 9 months old, they will usually have fought on that license, because often these fighters get these licenses to compete right away. They don't typically, they're not like other professions where they just renew these things over and over in perpetuity. They usually get the license in order to compete. And so you will have a recent weight on that fighter, or they won't have a license, which is often the case on these last minute replacements. And you'll be able to send them to the doctor, and then you'll have a real weight on them. So if they propose it at 70, if you send them to the physician right away to get their physical, which I'm maybe, I don't know if the physical is part of the licensing process in Massachusetts. I'm talking about the physical part, not the pre-fight, the medical physical. But if it is, then you'll get you a weight on that fighter right then, and that way you'll know.
Okay. Yeah, doctor.
Yes, good morning. This is Dr. Edgar Belinas, and pleasure having you speak. I'm one of the state's ringside physicians, and I've been doing this for, oh gosh, I think 12 plus years now, something like that, more, probably 15, and working my way up through boxing, and the UFC was sanctioned here several years ago, and been involved with that aspect of the sport as well, and it's always entertaining from the perspective of providing safety, to the sport with regards to all these ideas of how to look at weight cutting and what to do about the dramatics of it, because obviously it invokes a lot of morbidity and mortality, and sad to say that mortality did rear its ugly head here about 2 years ago with an amateur mixed martial art fighter who did drastically cut weight, and unfortunately, despite hospitalization immediately and despite significant IV hydration and whatnot, he didn't come around. And he did have an underlying issue as well. He had sickle cell trait, which mixed into the factor as well, and which actually is guiding us into suggesting that sickle cell trait, be also part of an application as to a fighter having it or not having it. I find it a question directed to you with regards to your regulations is that recently, when I say recently, I believe would be in the neighborhood of the fall of last year, and correct me if I'm wrong, there was a fighter out of Massachusetts, Danny O'Connor, who was main event for one of your shows in California, and who did actually some significant weight cutting because it prompted him to actually go to the hospital, and I think he was there for 24 hours, and he had to undergo some significant rehydration. Since he presented to your state as a fighter, how did he sort of slip through the cracks, if you will, with your 10-point type of system? wasn't he someone that should have been caught, so to speak, and not therefore get himself involved, with the significant weight cut that he wound up doing, which then led to cancellation of the fight, and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, he was a main event fighter for your show in California. Can you make some
He was the
comments?
main event guy.
Yes, sir.
He was the main event guy, and I remember talking to Bob Arum about that when it got canceled.
Right.
And I'm actually looking at his file right now, and I'm going to tell you how that got through. We have a provision in our rules that allows us to take out-of-state physicals.
Mm-hmm.
We took his out-of-state physical. We didn't get our read on him, and it was we probably that's we learned us a pretty good lesson from that one.
Mm-hmm.
Is on these type of fights, we're not going to take an out-of-state physical that's that old. Now, he didn't. He had fought lower than that the fight before. And I'm on memory here because I'm not, but he had, when I was looking at that fight, it seems like he was he had been proposed or he had fought lower than that the fight before that. So it wasn't like we didn't think that it was going to be, an issue because, and I don't want to tell you wrong, it seems like it was Ramirez who was going to fight. I don't want to tell you wrong, but it seems like it. And, he had made the weight lower the fight before than what he was proposed at. It didn't raise any eyebrows over here.
Mm-hmm.
And we took an out-of-state physical, which we learned as a lesson. So if you're wondering how he got through, that's kind of the piece of it.
Yeah. I mean, you said earlier that, obviously, the physicians, the doctors, should have responsibilities and so forth. I mean, here in our state, a physical exam is good for a full year. Is that correct, Jen? Correct. Full year.
Correct.
So that being said, I mean, if we took a physical exam from a fighter that was from 10 months ago, I mean, that weight obviously on that thing could be quite significant versus a weight that a doctor will have to see, again, on a physical that you're referring to, maybe 6 or 8 weeks before the fight. So in other words, that fighter's physical that he had, or she had, could still be good, but months prior, but within that 12-month period. So it sounds like you're suggesting that a fighter undergo another physical to catch another weight somewhere in the neighborhood of like 8 weeks prior to an event, which is fine. I mean, in an ideal world, I'd love to have them get weights every month, for a full year, so we can really follow, what their weights are all about. But of course, that's logistically not going to happen. So what do we do? We thought about this ourselves here, and we're emphasizing the educational aspect of it. And I think we heard from Mike Bovier earlier, with regards to the trainers. I think these fighters, with their trainers, could give us this additional information and almost put it in their license, part of their licensing to be a trainer, that they take a course or the videos that you were referring to, which I would love to have, by the way, educating them on the dangers of significant weight cutting, and let them be the ones who can document, weights prior to, events. And that would incorporate even more information for us. All right, go ahead, sir.
Doctor, you're exactly right about what you said.
Thank
A
you.
10-month physical is not going to do a lot of help for you.
Mhm.
Okay, and we learned that with the narrative that we just talked about.
Mhm.
But if you have the second day weigh-in, and they're an in-state fighter, they're one of your fighters, not coming from out of state, or you know, if they're a New England fighter,
Right.
and you've got a weight on that fighter. So, for example, if they fought 10 months ago, or if they got a license 10 months ago, most of the time they will have fought on that license. I think everybody in your commission would agree with that. So they get a license, they typically get the license to fight. So they fought. If you'll weigh them when they get to the venue, obviously you've got the weigh-in weight because you weighed them. Ask the promoter to bring the same scale that was weighed the same day, and whether you guys have a drug testing protocol or not, just when they show up, just ask your inspector, have them take their shoes off and hop on the scale and just record the weight really quickly. And you'll just write it down. And that way you're able to track the difference between their weigh-in and what they weighed. And if they're one of these people that has gained a significant amount, I had this Bellator the other day, 18%. If they're one of these people that has gained a lot of weight overnight, then you're able to flag that person for future bouts. You could have Jen Skype them for a future bout. You could ask for a new physical.
Right.
There's a lot of options, but it's up to you, doctor. Your ringside physician. It'd be up to you to make that decision on whether this fighter can compete at this weight class safely in the future. Because basically, staff, I'm staff from my commission, Jen, your staff. It's just up to us to provide you the information, and you make the medical decision.
And that's where you reference kind of the 30-day and the 10-day weight check-in, just kind of, it may not be, it can be manipulated, as you say here, and it may not always be accurate, but at least it's a point of contact with the fighter that they know is coming, so they're a little more in tune to it.
100%. I mean, we saw, like I had, the WBC did this. This wasn't my deal. I just took it from the WBC, but we had a guy that fought Triple G a few years ago. He missed weight. Pretty significantly on fight day. He ended up losing, but on the weigh-in day he missed weight. But he had made the marks on the 30, and he had completed those checks. You know what I mean? So that box was checked on that piece of it. Sean Porter just fought over here a couple weeks ago, and you might have saw that. He had to cut his hair to make the weight, but he had made weight. We got his weights from where he was coming down from the BC, so we kind of knew where he was coming. But being able to track that weight is incredibly helpful, I think, for making sure that these fighters are fighting appropriately. Let me explain. What you don't want to have happen, and this is what's happening far, far too often, is these guys are not cutting the weight the correct way. Like, it's not gradually coming down. We know that there's going to be weight cutting through dehydration. I don't think anybody's confused about that. But you want to see a gradual decrease to get to a point, as opposed to just showing up on fight week and then suddenly trying to cut 20 or 30 pounds through water in 2 or 3 days. I know you commissioners have saw these guys are carrying around these gallons of water on fight week. I'm sure you guys have saw that. They're just chugging it. Okay, they're doing this thing called water loading, and I'm sure your physician can better explain it, but somehow or another it throws the kidneys into overdrive, and you'll lose a lot of weight doing that stuff. That kind of practice isn't super healthy, according to my doctors. And that's kind of what we're trying to avoid, is you can see the gradual decline, and the medical professionals can make the call. And if the call is this fight's okay, just not at this weight, then you guys can tell the matchmakers and they can renegotiate this. They can do it with a pen.
So this is very helpful for us. As I said, it's great timing because we're doing a reg review and weight cutting and all these provisions that you're discussing and sharing with us. We're, considering everything for part of our reg changes. Related to that, so the sickle cell issue. So we did unfortunately have a fighter, Rondell Clark, pass away 2 years ago due to complications from weight cutting, dehydration, and he had the sickle cell trait. Something that has come up in conversation is adding a sickle cell blood test requirement. Any thoughts on that? Just curious to get your kind of thoughts.
I don't know enough. I'm actually interested to know and following what your commission is going to do on that issue. I think I don't have I'm learning from your commission on that issue, and it may be something that we have to adopt, out here as well, because it sounds to me like that absolutely should be looked at, certainly as it relates to weight cutting and these type of things in general. So yeah, I'm honestly just waiting to see what happens. And I'm gonna talk to my physicians about that.
Okay, I appreciate that. We respect your opinion. So maybe we have open lines of communication as we go through the process.
Can I ask one more question? Hi, Andy. This is Sam Silverman from the Rondell Clark Foundation. One thing that has come up a decent amount during these discussions as the Commission considers regulation changes is the logistical and practical kind of burden or implications of making some of these regulation changes. So since you have actually implemented this and lived through it for a couple of years now, can you speak to the kind of logistical lift or practical requirements that have had to take place in order to monitor these regulations with regards to the 10-point plan?
It's logistically hard. Okay, I mean, sir, there's not another way for me to say it. It's created a lot more work for my staff. There's more work involved, but that's what it takes. I think having the information early helps us to make better regulatory decisions on these fights, because, and I want to say this because this is an important piece. There's three big pieces that affect combat sports safety. I feel like weight cutting is the number one issue. Drug testing and use of anabolic substances and performance enhancers, that's another problem. And then the third problem is concussions and neurological health. I would suggest to the commissioners and to you, sir, from the foundation, that these three different points are not independent from each other. I feel like they're connected together in many cases. Like, I've had multiple fighters tell me, Wendy, I cut weight. I took this drug to help me with the weight cut so I wouldn't lose the mass and I could recover better and all this type of stuff. And then, I don't have data myself. My doctors seem to think it, and they've talked about it at length. But there is, the brain dehydrates last. It keeps its fluid pretty good. But my doctors seem to think that severe dehydration and concussions are somewhat or maybe I should say brain injury or brain trauma are sort of connected together. Now, that I don't have data that I can point to that shows that. The doctors may, but I don't. But they seem to think all these things are connected. And I know the first two are connected. I've had it happen too many times. To answer your question, sir, logistically for the staff, yeah, it's hard. I mean, it's harder, but it's what it takes. And, if what it takes to protect these fighters, look, we did 159 pro shows last year and several hundred amateur shows through entities. It's just what it's going to take. And, I do it. Yeah, it's not logistically easy. It's going to be an administrative burden. But if you can do the physical piece of it, which will get the doctor to sign off on it, that piece is not any more difficult. And that way your commission at least knows, is this weight class reasonable for this fighter? And if you can establish that, I think that's a long way in having people Skyped and having your inspectors run specific gravity tests, which is not hard, it's just a dipstick, but doing all these different things, that takes staff and training and all this different things. If you can't do all the points, I think your guys, you're on this call, you're doing a rate change, I think you're absolutely doing what you can to protect your athletes.
Thank you. You guys got anything? Yeah.
Yeah, just.
Go ahead, please.
Sorry, Dr. Bolinas again. Yeah, I couldn't agree more with regards to what you said about those three factors. The PED, what do you folks in California, are you using USADA's type of tox screens for checking on that? Or, there's other organizations out there too. Water, I believe, is one. And what specifically have you guys been using out there for the physical enhancing drug testing?
So we do lots and lots of drug tests in California.
Yeah.
Okay. But I think we did 600 or 700 tests last year. Okay. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean that I run 600 or 700 tests at UCLA using a World Anti-Doping Agency panel. Okay. I did maybe about 100 of those. Now it's an estimate, something like that. Okay. I tell you that because what we do is we buy the $6, $7 pop test. Okay, the little kit. You collect urine and then you press them and you will know if the fighter's on drugs of abuse. They don't do PEDs, but they'll do drugs of abuse. We use lots and lots of those. We run through those, lots of those. And if you have a hit on that, you can't. You need to have lab verification, so we'll send it off to a lab that we contract with to verify that the kit's right. But that's mainly what we do. We work with USADA some. We can talk offline about USADA, and we work with them. They work with UFC. They're the UFC's exclusive anti-doping partner. I work with Dr. Goodman from VADA. Also, a lot of times what I'll do is if I have a drug testing failure and I actually just widely report it in the press, I'm not telling you anything that's not out there in the press, but we have a UFC fighter who, absolutely a supplement caused his failure. There's no doubt about it. He had the supplement tested, the whole bit. So I put him in the VADA program, and I gave him a lesson suspension because he went into the VADA program. Okay, so in the voluntary anti-doping agency program, as long as he passes that, he'll come off suspension in 4 months and he can go back to making a living. So we work with Dr. Goodman's group. We work with USADA from time to time. My inspectors are trained, quite a few of them as doping control officers, so we do a lot of it ourselves because, UCLA is here. It's one of the two World Anti-Doping Agency laboratories. And actually, our amateur program, CAMO, actually just recently, it may not be done, but they're finishing up their contract with Smyrtle, the lab in Salt Lake, the other World Anti-Doping Agency lab. Dr. Daniel Eichner is the head of that, and they're going to be doing some drug testing at the amateur level with them. But you know, when I was in Georgia, because I used to run the Georgia Commission for 5 years, and then I'm out here, the budgetary concerns are much different. Like in California, I have a much larger drug testing budget. In Georgia, I didn't have as big a drug testing budget. So what I would suggest is, depending on how much resources the commission wants to spend on drug testing, if you don't want to spend $300 and $400 a test to a World Anti-Doping Agency program, you might want to spend $6 or $7 each kit, train your inspectors up on that, because that will create deterrence. I saw it, it works, and if fighters know they're getting tested, you will see a decrease in the number of not just drugs and abuse, but also in performance-enhancing drugs, because fighters, you always reserve the right to send that to the lab.
Makes sense.
So you wouldn't pull that fighter just off the urine test until it gets back to the lab and verified?
It depends on what it is, sir. It's a great question. If it's marijuana, we don't pull them. We just don't. And here's the reason why. The POP test, their thresholds are 20 nanograms per milliliter. The World Anti-Doping Agency threshold is 150 nanograms per milliliter. So if they hit on a POP test, doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to hit in the lab, okay? And it doesn't, you gotta, our rules require lab verification. So what I do is, in situations like that, is I go to the doctor and I'll say, listen, we got a problem here. This guy's hit. They'll say, he or she'll say, what did he hit for? And I'll tell them, and they'll go back and check him out and say, no, he's good to go. That's only on marijuana. If it's the other ones, we had one once on cocaine. The first POP test hit, I got another one on him, the second POP test hit, and I just made the executive call, we're not running this fight. Now, my rules required verification. We verified it. Everything was okay, but I didn't want somebody that was actively had cocaine metabolites in their system. I didn't want them competing in combat sports. So that was a call I made, but for all intents and purposes, most of our hits out here are marijuana, THC, and we typically run those fights if they hit on a POP test, because the fine is not even much money out here, and our doctors don't consider it to be a PED.
When are your inspectors, sorry, it's Commissioner Lambert again, when are your inspectors conducting that test? Like day of the fight, day of the weigh-in?
Yeah, it's a great question. You can't do it at the weigh-in because they don't have any urine to give us, okay? So, I mean, it's true. We're talking about weight cutting, but it's true, okay? So, if you're going to do drug testing, you have to do it, and when I say have to, I mean, you can do whatever you'd like to, but it's my opinion. You have to do it when they show up for their fight, okay? And what we do is we have a scale right there in the middle, right when they show up, and they'll show up, they'll hop on the scale, we'll get their weight, they'll go to the doping control room, we'll get their urine sample, and then we'll escort them and show them to their locker room. And that's the way it works.
Okay.
If you do it after the fight, and some places do it after the fight, here's been my experience with that. I have personal experience with this issue. If you have a fighter that you suspect is on a PD or a substance, if you wait till after the fight, one or two things is going to happen. Either that fighter isn't on anything and they're going to take a really, really long time to urinate if the fight's been a long time because they've got dehydrated during the course of the athletic competition. Or, I saw this happen before, and I don't know if the fighter was on it or not. I don't have any idea. But when we want to get it, I saw some severe headaches appear to where the doctors had to use the ambulance. And then what I can tell you unequivocally, commissioners, is if you send an inspector to the hospital to try to collect a urine sample for a patient, they won't let you in there. You will lose, you lose jurisdiction. You can't, it's not happening. And so I would suggest that you do it when they arrive at the venue.
Yep.
Do you random? Is that a random selection of your fighters?
It is, sir.
Okay, can I ask two more quick questions? We appreciate your time. This is Michael with Cage Titans again. One might be quick. Have you come up with a solution for PED testing on the local level, where cost obviously comes into play on the club level?
I have not. What we do is, drug testing is expensive. We all know that. What we do is, if you're going to test, one of the things that will save money on if you're going to test for PEDs at the local level is we use a pop test, and we'll pop it for the drugs of abuse side. So so that way you're only testing for PEDs. So when you send it to the lab, instead of paying like $413 for a full panel, you may be getting it for $212, something like that. So that'll save you some money there, and you can do twice as many. But yeah, testing everybody with performance enhancing drugs, at least for this commission, is just not feasible. You can't do it. You have to do a random selection. But we do test our club shows at some degree of frequency so that the athletes are aware that at least it exists.
Yeah. So, Michael, again with Cage Titans, my next question, because that was a good one, because obviously they know they're going to get tested at the highest level if they make the UFC, but on their way up, they know they can abuse performance-enhancing drugs to get that edge, to get them there. There's a big money payoff, so I think it's important at the club level. My next question, my last question, has to do with weight cutting. Obviously, we're here with Rondell Clark and the tragedy that was him. Has your research or adopting this 10-point must system brought up any concerns about how many times you make a specific weight within a given time frame? I say this because Rondell, on his pre-fight, his physical with his paperwork, he was 190 pounds, which is only about 11% out from his fight weight. But he did fight twice within a 2-month period at that weight class. So have you had any research that has looked into that?
When I get my research back from the university, I'll be happy to share it. I'll provide it to Jen, and she'll provide it to all of you guys if you'd like to see it. What I can tell you is I don't have research that shows that just yet. Here's what I can tell you anecdotally, because I regulate a lot of fights, and this is what I think you guys are going to follow this line of thinking. Fighters, and I'm not speaking specifically to Rondell's Clark situation. I'm talking about fighters in general. As fighters age, it becomes more difficult for them to lose the weight. Now that's kind of a blanket statement, but it's something I've noticed. Certainly in lower weight class, it becomes more difficult for them to lose the weight down. And so if you have a fighter who's been consistently struggling to make a particular weight, if they get older, it's typically not getting better. It's typically getting worse. So it's probably time to look at a weight class adjustment, especially if they've had trouble for the last couple of times making it. Bet they're not making it again. Yeah.
Thank you. All right. Do you have something?
No, I was just going to say thank you for his time.
Yeah, we really appreciate your time, Mr. Foster. We might follow up with you with some questions as we move forward on this topic, if that's okay.
Sir, you and Jen and your commission can call anytime. I appreciate talking with you, and I really appreciate the fact that you're looking at this issue, because this issue is the problem in combat sports right now.
No, we agree. We are trying to take it very seriously. So, again, we appreciate your time, and we will be in touch. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Have a good morning.
All right. Subcommittee regulation review update.
Sure. This is just an update of what we reviewed at the last subcommittee meeting. For debate, I'm just going over the highlights suggestions that we made. We reviewed section 13 through 19. 1302, recommendation was adjust select MMA weight classes as follow: welterweight 155 to 165, middleweight 165 to 175, super middleweight 175 to 185, that's a new weight class, light heavyweight 185 to 195, cruiserweight 195 to 225, that is a new weight class, and then heavyweight 225 to 265. 1303, add language from 1304 allowing the commission to order weigh-ins at any time. 1304-2, remove section on weight loss. This is an unarmed combatant who fails to make weight shall be given up to 1 hour after the weigh-in to lose a maximum of 2 pounds. 1306, add language clarifying the forfeited money goes to the opponent. 1402, add language banning the following: exposed zippers, nothing below knees, no knee braces, no exposed Velcro. 1404, there was no changes, but we were going to have the medical advisory board review it. And then 1606, add clarify definitions of TKO and KO, possibly adopt boxing definition. And that's it.
Thank you. And Jen, we're going to follow up separately for the next date. Okay, thank you. Review upcoming events. Any comments on the upcoming events? Jen, anything of note? Anything? All right. Any matters not reasonably anticipated 48 hours in advance of the meeting? Yes.
Michael Paul Ver at Cage Titans. I want to bring to light some upsetting information that I came aware of this past weekend at an event. It might have already been brought up, but there was a promotion that tried to put on a fight between a 20-10 professional fighter and an 0-3 fighter. This fight was passed by the Athletic Commission, which is scary to the standard that we're upholding these promotions to. In the past, if there was fights of this magnitude that got brought up to the commission, we would have to come in front of them as matchmakers to get these fights approved. Then that kind of went away, and it became standard practice that we'd have to write a justification on all the fights that we proposed to the Athletic Commission. And now the standard is we just put a fight card in. I kind of strongly caution that if this is the way we're going, where these fights we just send a fight card and it gets approved, no questions asked, and then we're brought to the carpet when we look for our renewal, these mismatches that are grossly happening are going to end up happening for a year before we address it. I think it needs to be addressed at the time and when the fight cards are put forward. The fight didn't happen, so we're lucky and we avoided it here. Mm-hmm. But we approved the matchups. Andy Foster said it. We're the commission. We approve these matchups. And something needs to be done. In addition to that, I think that a full investigation should happen into the whole surroundings of this fight happening. There is information that came out. I only know this because Rob Fuller, one of the fighters in question, he's fought for me before, and he's speaking to some local MMA media. But the practices that went on behind the scenes of making this fight was unethical. I started this promotion, Cage Titans, 9 years ago because of the reputation that promoters had of being shady, unethical. And to see this going on under our eyes here in Massachusetts is upsetting. AMMO as a promotion should be held accountable, the matchmaker and the promoter. it was basically, you make your own fight to the fighter, and we'll just put it on our card. One of the fighters, Saul Almeida, he paid for the flight for the fighter, he paid the purse for the fighter. These are just unethical things that are going on, and we're allowing it to happen. And I think that it should be brought to light. Somebody's got to speak up and bring it to your attention and let you guys do your job of investigating on all sides of what went down with this. And I think that we should also look into the process of how fights are approved. If we give you a fight card and something doesn't pass the smell test, bring it to our attention. I've come before this commission before, and I had to explain why I thought a 10-0 guy should fight a 3-6 guy. And I welcome that. I welcome that challenge to bring it to your attention why I think that fight should happen. If we're just letting this happen just by passing in a piece of paper and approving it, it's a scary situation, because already this weekend I've had 3 schools that are fighting on my card call me up and said, take all those matchups off the table. I want to 0-3 guy. I want to 0-5. The athletic commission will approve it. I'm not fighting that tough guy anymore. And then how's it look for us in Massachusetts? We're trying to do the right thing and take the right steps. But this practice has to be looked into. So, thank you.
Nope. Appreciate your comments, and I think as you noted, the fight was pulled. That was because it was brought to our attention, so it's something we're taking serious, and we were aware, so.
Yeah, I think that the word out is that the fight got pulled because of stitches in a finger, and which there's a whole level of cover up between the promoter and the fighter. Hey, cover it up, I'll cut the stitches out the day of the fight. There's a whole other level to that. But we got lucky that the kid had stitches in his finger, because I questioned, and you don't have to answer, no one has to answer me, but if that kid didn't have stitches in his finger, would that fight been pulled? Would have it been pulled? And if it got all the way to that point, it shouldn't have got to that point. So hopefully we'll look at it some more.
All right. Well, thanks. No, I appreciate you coming before us. You're a promoter.
Yeah.
Glad for all you do here in Mass, so thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Motion to adjourn at 12:39 p.m.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.